Thank you for tuning in once again to his Vine and Fig Tree podcast. My name is Kurt Olson. I'm your host, coming to you on the morning of April 22nd, 2026. Three things I have for you, and they are stories that have been kind of bubbling under the surface, and they're fairly explosive um, in detail. And they are things that two of them deal with voting in this country, and the other one deals with our military. So the first one is this would have been late last week. I saw a video that indicated that the Supreme Court this spring, there is a case that they heard focused on voting in Louisiana and the crafting of a district that was focused to get a specific kind of person elected. This happens all over our country with gerrymandering. The gerrymandered districts are most famous at the congressional level. You'll probably see some state legislature districts in various states that are creatively gerrymandered as well. And of course, that gets to every 10 years where there's a census, and then you craft uh, legislative districts at the level of Congress, state legislature, and even local, based on those population shifts. And as a lot of people know, there's a lot of shifting of the population from blue states to red states. Now, some people are arguing, well, those left wing voters just end up voting left wing in their new location. I'm not sure that's always the case, because some of the reasons those people are fleeing blue states is because of what they're doing in those states. But, anyways, this case in Louisiana will be decided sometime this spring. And there are indications that there is a section of the Voting Rights Act. And the Voting Rights Act was a law passed, I believe it was the 1960s. It may have been sooner than that, that gets to obviously voting. Um, and the result of it is going to uh, be as many as a dozen new Republican congressional districts surfacing in the South. Um, we'll see if that happens. But this also gets to what happened just last night in the state of Virginia, where Abigail Spanberger, former member of Congress, um, she gets elected governor, and they go gangbusters in basically redistricting the state of Virginia and putting it before voters for approval. Well, that happened yesterday, and the vote was 51 and change to 48 and change in favor of a map that gives Democrats four new congressional seats in the state of Virginia. And basically, what happened, the upshot of what happened there, because there were reports coming out of Virginia yesterday that they had presidential level voting lines in rural parts of Virginia. And that meant they were angry and probably voting no on the uh, congressional redistricting map. But sections of Fairfax County and probably Virginia Beach and Richmond and a couple other places put it over the edge. So that happened just last night. There's two other things happening here. And one of them involves the Supreme Court as well. Late last week, the New York Times did a story that focused on a shadow docket. So in 2016, under Barack Obama as president, he came out with some new green energy rules through the Environmental Protection Agency. Well, the Supreme Court at that time immediately took hold of those rules, and instead of having the lower courts decide something and then it coming to the Supreme Court, they immediately took action and they prevented that green energy bill from becoming law. And it would lead to eventually, just a couple of years ago, something involving the EPA where the Supreme Court blew up all this rulemaking that happens in the agencies and the departments around the federal government. And so on the left, this idea of a shadow docket was all gangbusters. The Supreme Court is rogue. They can't be trusted. See, this is why we need to pack the court. Meanwhile, on the right, the reaction is, who is leaking information from the Supreme Court? Because the Supreme Court is this agency, this institution where they have their conversations in a room. They stay there until decisions are released by the court. And the Dobbs decision was leaked in advance, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and now this, and people are like, who are the people on the court who are leaking information about how they do business? And let me just say this. If you believe for a second previous courts run by even liberals didn't have their own games that they played, if you truly believe that didn't happen, first of all, I would argue you're not only naive, but you would be willing to accept anything that the national media tells you. And the last thing involving voting and the court involves John Roberts. There are rumors that are surfacing that indicates that John Roberts could step down this summer, which would mean if that happened, Donald Trump would have the opportunity to name the next Chief Justice, because he replaced, I believe it was it William Rehnquist who was the Chief Justice that John Roberts replaced, and Roberts was appointed by George W. Bush. So at least the Roberts information is something you need to be alert to, especially over the summer. And then there's all this voting related stuff that impacts day to day. And my second item gets to another aspect of voting, and specifically election 2020. Now, let me just say this. I saw this morning. I did not see this when it came out yesterday. Catherine Herridge released this just before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, yesterday afternoon. This is a written post on X, and in the description to the podcast, I will include a variety of links, one of which is going to be the full Catherine Herridge report here. Headline: Exclusive. Whistleblower alleges 2020 CCP election influence ops targeting Trump were suppressed. And I first heard something like this on, was it Sunday or Monday? It was one of the 2 days. From John Solomon. John Solomon was on some program, some podcast or show somewhere, and he was basically saying there was going to be some information released about election 2020 that was going to be explosive. So Catherine Herridge is at least indicating to some degree that that is a very real thing. I'm going to read some of this, but not all of this. Bear with me. According to these accounts, the CIA, then led by Director Gina Haspel, would not document the Chinese influence operations in a formal way, out of concern that President Trump would use the intelligence to his advantage. Based on the complaint, again, this is from a whistleblower, senior intelligence officials are accused of heavy handed editing of the whistleblower's reports about China's sweeping influence operations during the 2020 election cycle. In some instances, senior CIA officials are accused of taking pen to paper to strike sections because the intelligence assessments would help Trump. I am told some track changes make specific reference to domestic politics. A senior intelligence official influenced or emphasized that in 2020, China was not held to the same standard as Russia and other adversaries, including North Korea, Iran, and its proxy Hezbollah. The other said Chinese influence operations were consistently downplayed, while Russia's activities were routinely amplified. This whistleblower had job responsibilities changed. There were threats to destroy their reputation, and they issued a dissent report that challenged the majority view about China's election activities that was allegedly altered, and the confidence level of that whistleblower information was downgraded. This is explosive because it gets to what's being reported here is that in the coming weeks or months, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard is going to release information that specifically focuses on this. And it will be explosive because it gets to the Chinese Communist Party actively engaged in an election in this country because they didn't want Trump back in office. And I will let people read this in its entirety. It's a long piece by Catherine Herridge. And let me just say a couple things about Catherine Herridge. Catherine Herridge is one of the 10 to 12 journalists in this country that I trust. And she was with Fox News at one time. She moved to CBS, and then CBS fired her. She now does all of her reporting on X. And if you don't follow Catherine Herridge on X, you should, A. And secondly, if Catherine Herridge is reporting it, it's solid. It's gold. And this is something for people to be looking out for in the coming weeks and months as we find out more about what's going on here or what happened with election 2020. And just to keep people alert, election 2020 was during COVID. Election 2020 brought us, oh, we don't want that many people standing in line because of COVID. Oh, we got to do mail in ballots. And of course, mail in ballots now are going on and on and on. And it takes weeks. Embarrassingly, it takes weeks for people to be announced as unofficial winners of specific elections. The last item I want to bring to your attention comes from a source who emerged during Doge. Doge, of course, early 2025 during the early Trump 2, Elon Musk and his merry band of technology geniuses and others just did a full raking of the federal government on various things that were going on and contracts that were being spent and waste of money and other things. This source goes by the name Data Republican, small r. And this, I believe, a female, when she puts together stuff, it's about bringing receipts. It's about catching people in their own words, whether it was written or if it was spoken. And Data Republican came out with something just before midnight on Monday. And basically, she is arguing this: the only thing standing in the way of a coup and Donald Trump is Secretary of War, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. Now, you'll remember that when Pete Hegseth was up for nomination and confirmation, they went after him about women, they went after him about alcohol, they went after him about a lot of stuff. And what Data Republican is arguing, the only reason they went after the credibility of Pete Hegseth was to destroy him because he was going to be a loyal person in the military close to Trump. And what she argues is there is a variety, and this is a long thread, and I will link this in the description to the podcast as well. And what she argues here is that some left-wing organizations have done research that suggests if you're going to overthrow a government or engage in a coup, you have to have a military that is willing to defect or disobey orders. And that's why Pete Hegseth is in the way. And you'll remember that last fall, we had drug boats in the Caribbean being blown up, and some 130 cartel people or mules blown up at sea. Okay? And it was at that time that there were 6 members of the Congress, 2 senators, and 4 members of the House, all Democrats. They came out with this little video that basically encouraged members of the military, don't believe illegal orders. And when that happened, those 6 members of Congress took an awful lot of grief over it because they're basically telling the military and others, you can disobey specific orders from not just the president, but other senior officials in the government. And those 6 members of Congress were Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, who is considering a run for president in 2028, freshman U.S. Senator Elise Slotkin, Jason Crow of Colorado, Chris Deluzio of Pennsylvania, Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania, and Maggie Goodlander of New Hampshire. Those 6, and they either have some kind of background in the military or the CIA that put them in the position of doing this video. So this is a really long piece that Data Republican puts together, and she brings the receipts of the groups that are pushing for this kind of thing and how they believe Pete Hegseth is in the way. That's all I have for you this week. And again, when I try to craft topics that I'm sharing with you, I do it because these things grab my attention. And if you have things that you want me to talk about, you would have to bring them to my attention. Find me by email or send a message through Substack, something. But these are the things that grab my attention this week. I'm dropping another column on Sunday. If you like what you're reading in the column, if you like what you're hearing on the podcast, please share it. For those who do, I thank you in advance. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. And until next time, God bless and goodbye.